So we got a call several weeks ago from a woman who was already in the middle of a real estate transaction and things just weren't going well. They'd had inspections done and they weren't feeling good about the inspector or just the overall process in general. They had doubts about the home's value and condition, as well as a lack of trust in the inspector that they used. She was calling to see if she could hire us as a third party to come in and sort of clean up the mess, so to speak, and help them get through the rest of the transaction. Unfortunately, we're prohibited from stepping in the middle of a transaction. And that's why reaching out to us should be your first step. Not only can we help you with your move to Houston, but we have agents in your city who can help you on the sell side. So first thing we'll do when you give us a call or reach out to us, because that's, remember, the number one thing to do, we'll schedule a Zoom call for you to meet with us and our lender. And during that meeting, we're going to determine your specific wants, your needs, and we'll get an understanding of your why. Understanding your why will help us find the best place for you to live in Houston. Example, we have clients that moved here from Colorado. She was going to be working in the med center and he would be working from home. They had 2 school-age kids and they were both heavily involved in sports. So spending time with their kids and each other was at the top of the priorities. So a short commute and a kid-friendly community with sport amenities was just going to be key for them. Originally, they thought they were going to have to live out in the suburbs in order for them to have an active lifestyle, but we were able to actually get them into a gorgeous house in Meyerland on a very generously sized lot. And now she's got a short commute. They're able to go bike and hike along the raised bayou trails. And their son participates in the Houston Dynamo's Soccer Development League. Had they not reached out to us, she would have been driving 2 to 3 hours a day on top of her busy schedule. That's huge. So 2 of the most important things that we'll also determine on our call will be your budget and your financing needs. So if we decide that we want to work together after we meet over Zoom, the next step, which is number 2, would be paperwork. So we'll go over the buyer's representation agreement as well as all of the additional disclosures, and that'll educate you on things like special flood hazard areas, availability of hazard insurance, protecting your home from mold. For your protection, get a home inspection, things like that. Now, we want to make sure that you understand the importance of having a buyer's rep agreement because in every transaction, there's a seller, there's a buyer, and a broker can represent a buyer, a seller, or can function as an intermediary. If the broker acts as an intermediary for both sides of the transaction, then he or she can only disclose facts and not share opinions. So the broker still has to treat all parties fairly. If a buyer decides not to sign a buyer's rep agreement but still works with an agent, it's called subagency. So subagency is when a license holder acts as a subagent by aiding a buyer in a transaction without having an agreement to represent the buyer. So a subagent can assist the buyer but doesn't represent the buyer and must place the interest of the owner first. Well, this is really important to know because in reality, if you don't have a buyer's rep agreement with a licensed broker or agent, that agent that you're working with will represent the seller by default. So that's really important to know because in my opinion, you need somebody that's, working on your team, working for you and your best interest because the seller is going to have a listing agent representing them and their best interest and their fiduciary responsibility is going to be to the seller. If you're working with an agent, you want their fiduciary responsibility to be to you, not the seller. So with representation comes the fiduciary responsibility and the responsibility of confidentiality. So it really is in your best interest to have representation when buying property here. Okay, so number 3 is we're going to help you secure your financing. So sellers, when you're ready to make an offer, a seller is going to require either proof of funds or a pre-approval letter, and that's going to need to be from a reputable bank. So if you're planning on paying cash, we'll review the necessary documentation with you in order to submit an acceptable offer. So we like to let you know this up front so that there aren't any surprises or issues when it's time to submit your offer to Mr. or Mrs. Seller. Now, if you're not planning on paying cash, you're going to need to get pre-approved with a lender. we strongly recommend working with a local lender, bank or mortgage broker. Over the years, I've had a lot of clients come in with, already being pre-approved through one of the big box banks, or most recently by a lot of the online lenders. And, that can be great, and you're shopping for the rate, but they don't always know all of the local rules and nuances of getting a deal done here. And it can be a problem when you need to get in touch with them. So you've got your person that's sort of done their sales pitch to you and is, yeah, we're going to get you this great interest rate and it's going to be so wonderful. Your fees are going to be low. But then when you get into they hand you off to the processor, and then suddenly nobody picks up their phone and nobody's responding to emails, and you've got all these deadlines to meet in order to stay within contract so that you don't lose your earnest money, and you can't get in touch with that lender. And so it can turn into a real nightmare. So we've just seen it happen, time and time again. And so we always recommend working with a local lender. So we will introduce you to a lender that we trust. Vital to work with someone who picks up their phone, answers emails or text messages, or who will even give you their cell phone number, because I can tell you right now that most of those big box or online banks are not going to give you their cell phone number. So if there's a problem, you're not going to be able to reach them. So many things can go wrong that don't have to. So just save yourself the stress. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is Dru Mims with the Living in Houston team right here in Houston, Texas. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything about working, eating, sleeping, living, playing in Houston, then make sure you tap that subscribe button and click that little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. All right, that leads us to number 4. We're going to set up a customized home search within your own web portal. So you'll receive emails as new properties come on the market that fit your criteria. We'll even send you off-market properties that are coming soon to the market, which is great because you'll have access to them before they actually hit the market, which can really help your buying position. So you'll be able to easily categorize each property as either a favorite, a possibility, or not interested. And we'll be able to see that on the other side. You can even take notes on each listing, like, oh, I love the 3-car garage, or I hate the backyard, or I don't like the style of the kitchen. I want white cabinets. I don't want, brown, whatever it is. So we'll be able to see your notes and categories, which will help us in narrowing down your search. So before you come to town to look at properties, we would schedule another Zoom call just to go over the property list and put together a game plan for your visit to Houston. Get the schedule, the tour dates together. Which brings us to number 5, which is scheduling your house hunting trip to Houston. So before you arrive in Houston, we will have already narrowed down which areas that we want to focus on. So typically we would go look at a few homes in each focus area so that you can get a good feel for the neighborhoods, because you're going to want to find out which is the best fit for you. And sometimes it's just a feeling, right? Sometimes you're going to like the look of a neighborhood. It could be the amenities, right? It's just can be all different things. So we're going to figure out which neighborhood you like best that we want to narrow down our search to. And that's really the most enjoyable part of the process for us, because we get to know you and show off this city that we absolutely love. So if we don't find the right house on your initial trip, we're going to have a pretty good feeling for what you like and don't like. So we'll be able to go and preview homes and do FaceTime showings, when you can't be here in person. So we like to call number 6 our white glove service. So once we find the right house for you, the next step is going to be to submit an offer. So we'll get that offer written up and we'll submit it over to the seller. And at that point, we'll begin negotiations. So I like to write a very clean contract. It's super important, right, when you're negotiating, because you're not just negotiating price, you're negotiating the closing date, the amount of earnest money that you're putting down, the option fee money, which the option period is like your due diligence period in which you have to do inspections and negotiate out any repair monies or repairs. And actually in the state of Texas, you can opt out during that option period for any reason, and you would only lose your option money, but you would still get to keep your earnest money. So without getting too deep down that rabbit hole of how it all works, because we're going to explain that to you in our calls, the important thing to know is that we're going to negotiate the best possible deal for you. So once we're under contract and everybody's agreed and everybody's signed on the dotted line and we've delivered the earnest and option fees, which now you can just wire those Most title companies actually have apps that you can use, which is pretty cool. That all happened during COVID, so everybody's going digital. So the next thing is going to be to schedule inspections. Now, we recommend having a structural and mechanical and a wood destroying insect because we do have termites here in Texas. So there's subterranean termites, which are in the soil, and we have them here. So it's typically a matter of when, not if. So it's always important to have wood destroying insect inspection done when you're buying any house. The second type of termites are called drywood termites, and those are the type that fly. And those tend to be in the older neighborhoods like the Heights, where you've got a lot of older wood. You don't really see those out in the suburbs with the newer homes. If there's a swimming pool, you're going to want to have the pool inspected. If the house is made of stucco, you're definitely going to want to have a stucco inspection. We could do a whole video on that. If the main inspector finds something wrong, like with the AC, we're going to want to bring in an AC specialist. So we're going to help you coordinate all of that and manage that process and make it as streamlined and easy and painless as possible and negotiate the best deal for you. Once we have the results of the inspection reports, then we'll go over everything. We'll have another, quick meeting to outline all of the things that need to be addressed. And hopefully there won't be too many things, but if there are, that's okay. We will then write up an amendment and approach the seller, and we will negotiate either that the seller do repairs. So if it's something like termite treatment, you're going to want to have that done prior to closing. Unless it's something like a leak or the AC is not working properly, you're better off asking for money and getting either a credit at closing or a reduction in the sales price, because every seller is going to want to get off as inexpensively as possible. And, buyers are going to want the best job possible. So we really recommend asking for money and not asking the seller to do the repair for you, unless it's something that's an immediate need, like a leak, for example. Okay, so during that option period, you're also going to want to shop for hazard insurance, because you can't get out of a contract because you find out that insurance isn't affordable. So we're going to have you get a hazard insurance quote, and also I strongly encourage you, if it's not in a flood zone, and if it is, of course, to get a flood insurance quote as well. So we'll need to make sure that we get a survey ordered, which the title company can order that for us. We just have to make sure that that happens if it's needed. So the bank is then going to order an appraisal. If the appraisal comes back, and this, again, this is why it's so important to work with us, because really we're negotiating the price up front. We're then negotiating any repairs. And then we're also going to be possibly negotiating the appraisal if it doesn't appraise for the sales price or higher. And that can be really key, because that's where a whole deal can fall apart very easily. All right, so the next step is during that time before we close, we're going to remind you and make sure that you have your utility services all set up, which is super important, because there's nothing worse than closing day and going to the house to move in and realizing that you forgot to turn on the electricity. And then the next step is headed to closing, which is obviously the most fun. So the bonus of our white glove service is that we get to stay in touch with you. We love that part of what we do. So we'll keep you up to date monthly on your home's value. We'll remind you to submit your homestead exemption form, and we'll even provide comps if needed annually in order for you to protest your taxes and keep your tax bill down. So when you're ready to start this process, give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email. However you'd like to get a hold of us, we've got your back on moving to Houston, Texas. Until the next video, we'll catch you later.